We're joined now by Shahid Buttar, who is a longtime social justice activist, a former challenger to Nancy Pelosi last cycle, and launching another campaign this time around against Speaker Pelosi in her San Francisco district. Shahid, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. It's great to be with you.
For sure. And so you and I were talking recently about a phenomenon that I've noticed in my coverage of a lot of different primaries, that even when a candidate falls short, there can be real benefits to the public of that campaign. And I was one of the most powerful examples that jumps out in front of me is that Sarah Smith, if you remember, challenged Representative Adam Smith in Washington. He was still is the chairman of the Armed Services Committee and a rather hawkish Democrat, but she managed to make it into the top two primary system, that the same as California has. The top two go on rather than it being a traditional primary. And because she was challenging him constantly, and particularly on his unwillingness to stand up against the war in Yemen, he ended up becoming a cheerleader for a resolution, that Ro Khanna pushed to basically try to force the hand of the Trump administration to end that war, and got a war powers resolution through the House of Representatives. She ended up getting hammered in the general election, but left a real legacy. It didn't end the war. But it did set back the war making cause. Like it was a real blow to the U.S., Saudi Arabia, UAE effort over there. And so as you watched Pelosi position herself throughout your campaign, what were the most noticeable shifts that you saw her take last time around?
I'd call out 6 of them, and you're absolutely right to observe the opportunity for campaigns that might even prove electorally unsuccessful to shift the needle and move the policy ball forward. And when I look at our campaign last year, there's a top line that jumps out at me, and that's having won 81,000 votes against the most powerful voice in Congress. It's 30% more votes than anyone's ever won against her. And what you're drawing attention to here, I describe as the bottom line, the ultimate outcome of the policymaking process. And there were generational advances in both workplace organizing rights and justice in policing that passed the House last year, despite Pelosi's initial opposition. And I'm not going to claim sole credit for her shift, because frankly, I think social movements and labor had a big deal to do with that. But it is striking to me that the first time in her 34-year career that Nancy Pelosi showed up for any of those issues, or the bill that funded the Postal Service, or that War Powers Amendment that you described, or either of the presidential impeachment resolutions, that all required her facing another Democrat for the first time. And I don't think of that as circumstantial. I do see that the passage of the Protecting Right to Organize Act through the House as one of our, frankly, most enduring achievements. And I'm quite confident that Pelosi would not have seen fit to embrace labor if she didn't have the sharp threat of an electoral challenge lighting a fire under her.
What's the campaign looking like this time around? Are there other challengers in the race, and what makes you think that you'll fare better this time around than last time?
There are other challengers. I think the real reason I'll fare better this time around is what political scientists describe as name recognition, the increasing awareness in the district of the alternative that we present. And I would say that relative to not just the other challengers in this race, but relative to frankly many members of Congress, I do have a fair depth of experience and expertise that I dare say will prove quite helpful, particularly in the context of challenging authoritarianism. I see a bipartisan threat to democracy in the United States, and it's presented on issues from mass surveillance to executive secrecy, our belligerent foreign policy, xenophobic immigration enforcement policies within the United States, predatory policing, mass incarceration. These are issues that all intersect. They're issues that go very much to the heart of the oath of office, the commitment to defend the Constitution against all enemies, not just foreign, but particularly the domestic ones too. And too many policymakers, frankly, don't even understand the Constitution enough in order to recognize when it's implicated, let alone take meaningful action to defend it. And that's all I've ever done. I've spent 20 years following those prongs of the oath of office without an office. And when I look at most people in politics, they do what is popular. And the reason I think I'll perform better than last year and the other people that I might face in this race is simply that I don't do what's popular. I've never done what's popular. When I was fighting to establish marriage equality for my LGBTQ neighbors, it wasn't popular. Nancy Pelosi did not support it. None of the Democrats did, with the exception of our current governor. When I was fighting police departments around the country to challenge racial profiling policies well before the Ferguson uprising, that on the ground where we were doing it was popular, but certainly among Democrats it was not. I've taken a lot of positions that have forced me to fight the Democratic establishment, and that willingness to do the hard, unpopular, necessary thing, I think is particularly why we're going to do well in this cycle.
I also wanted to ask you about some news that you made today. Your defamation suit that you've launched against the San Francisco Chronicle. You've been no secret. You've been publicly critical of the Intercept for some of its coverage of the race, but the criticism that you leveled at the Chronicle in this suit seemed leagues beyond it. Why? So why the Chronicle, and tell people what this suit is about, and have you gotten any response yet, either from the public or from the Chronicle?
No response yet. We just filed in the last 24 hours. The suit ultimately aims to defend the democratic process and election integrity from the publication of racist election disinformation known to be false by the journalists who published it. And that's what happened at the Chronicle. It's one reason, frankly, I am grateful for your work as a journalist, because you were the journalist who ultimately debunked the accusations that the Chronicle printed uncritically twice, publishing incredibly defamatory, damaging allegations by a person with a long history of false, politically motivated accusation that was known to the Chronicle before they published. Now, when I look at, you asked about the Intercept too, and I would just note, I super appreciate your coverage in the race. I have not been nearly as impressed by your colleagues. And you discovered, for instance, that one of the people who had falsely accused me of other things admitted to their false accusation, while your colleague continued to platform their voices as if they had any credibility. And to catch political operatives who you've noticed in your subsequent reporting are not reliable observers of campaigns. There are people with their own interests and careers at stake. And the conflicts of interest by the sources who Akela Lacey quoted were not disclosed. There was a critical whistleblower who she suppressed for an entire year, and the Chronicle as well, who just published her report last week. And as Gloria Berry, who's an elected official on the Democratic Party County Central Committee here, establishes, people I had hired and then replaced from the local Democratic Party establishment, they were responsible for all of these lies. They orchestrated the presentation in the press of information that they also knew to be false for political purposes. And you can't falsely accuse a man of color without implicating white supremacy. It's intrinsic in the accusation. And that's what the Chronicle promoted. And frankly, election integrity demands ethical journalism, and that's why we're filing the suit.
And separate from the specific issue of the Chronicle and that one particular non-credible person who made the allegation on Medium. One of the challenges that you faced, kind of from a PR perspective, was as you just said, that these were former staff. If they were just activists in the city, or people who had known you, or anything other than former campaign staff, I think the media would have treated this situation differently. There's kind of a I don't know if deference is the word, but there is a credibility given to former staff who speak on the record. That there's kind of a presumption that regardless, that those people are entitled to have a platform to air whatever grievance they have, because they previously were working for a particular candidate. Since then, we've seen a number of instances where campaign staff, either current or former, but sometimes even current, are publicly attacking their own candidates. Hassan Lecky running in a Boston congressional race. Then we saw Dianne Morales and running in New York City. So perhaps these incidents are becoming more common. So I'm wondering, as you're running again, how are you thinking about hiring and building a team, given the experience that you had last time around?
Great question. Ultimately, one of the reasons I think former staff are given that credibility is they presented themselves as workers. When you and I both know that the workers on political campaigns are the volunteers. And it was my volunteers who my former staff were marginalizing. So I was defending workers against people who basically have the role of management consultants. That's what political campaign staff are. They're people who are paid to participate. They don't take on political risk. So they're the most privileged people in the process. So the idea that they're allowed any deference to me, frankly, is farcical. I can't hire people from San Francisco's Democratic Party. That's the long and short of it.
Right. So we'll have to leave it there for now, but we'd love to have you back on the conversation again soon. Best of luck in your campaign, Shahid. Thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. It's great to be with you.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.